the old squeeze fight.
Yeah, I'm with you. Gentlemen, before I have a chance to ask you some questions, I have a letter that's just arrived from Walker's Point, Kennebunkport, Maine. September 8, 2014. I am delighted to send greetings to all gathered in Washington, D.C. for the launch of this innovative partnership between the participating foundations in this new Presidential Leadership Scholars Program. Every former president is different, and that's as it should be. For example, not all of us skydive. That's not a judgmental comment, just a fact. Every so often, however, there is an idea so compelling that it brings together former chief executives and their foundations to push it forward. So it is with this Presidential Leadership Scholars Program, which will offer quality leaders the chance to study presidential decisions and learn from key administration officials, practitioners, and leading academics. We face a lot of big challenges both in and out of government, so the idea of developing more leaders from all walks of life to address them and help lead our nation forward is vitally important in my view. Thank you for being here today, and please ask the two distinguished gentlemen following me to keep it brief. Signed, George Bush. I understand President Bush is watching, so I know from everybody in this room today, we send greetings, respect, and salutations. Gentlemen, the letter I just read from 41 mentions the uniqueness of having these four presidential centers come together. In fact, I think this is the first collaboration ever among presidential centers in an ongoing initiative. Why did you decide to do this as a collaboration, and why did you pick leadership as the theme? President Bush.
Because. He said keep it short, right? Yeah. Hi, Mom. Anyway, because we've got a lot to offer. I mean, Bill and I have become friends in the post-presidency. I admire, I admired my pal's ability to communicate and to lead. I know he wants his library to be relevant as it heads into the future, as do I. I know 41 well. I've always admired President Johnson's leadership, and I know these centers and the education, the university they're associated with are tremendous assets that need to be used properly. And I felt, and I know Bill feels the same, well, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. Anyway, I felt that it's a fantastic use of our ability to bring people together. And the reason why leadership, I know in Washington everybody assumes we're talking about the next, president or next senator. We're not. We're talking about leadership in all aspects of life. And, one of the things I've learned, I guess maybe through my painting, is I'm trying to leave something behind, something to make the world a better place. And we did that, hopefully, as people will judge it that way as when we were president. But there's still a lot of life to live. And I think a great contribution to our country will be to educate the next generation of leaders. And so I'm thrilled to be associated with this. It's a big deal.
President Clinton.
Well, first, I wanted to do it because the great test for any democracy at any time is how to have vigorous debate, serious disagreement, knock down, drag out fights, and somehow come to ultimately a resolution that enables the country to keep moving forward. I mean, the founders said our job was to create a more perfect union. They never said our job was to agree on everything. But if you read the Constitution, it ought to be subtitled, "Let's Make a Deal." because it was studiously designed to avoid dictatorship. Therefore, leadership styles they're all different, but in the end, we have to both let our differences flourish and come to some sort of understanding about how to deal with our challenges and how to go forward. These libraries and foundations represent 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, 3 of us, fortunately, still around. People of my age were profoundly affected by President Johnson, the Civil Rights Act, the whole set of things that happened in the 60s. And so I think we're in a great struggle in America and around the world to define the terms of our interdependence. This is the most interdependent age in human history. And we were laughing about going to restaurants and having to spend our time taking selfies with people.
At least they're still asking, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And but it's like, it used to be people who want to shake your hands. Now they want to have shaken your hand and have a record of it. But we're all, we can't get away from each other. The question is, how will we define the terms of our relationship? And that's going to take enormous amounts of leadership in every sector. I'm glad George said that. This is not primarily a political deal. We believe that there are some skills, and I also think leaders are made. You may have some innate abilities you're born with, but our military proves that you can train leaders and that their capacities can dramatically increase. So I hope we can be helpful.
President Clinton, let me follow up on that last point you made about leaders not being made. This center is supposed to be teaching leadership, but can it actually be taught? How do you do that?
Well, I think some things can be taught, but some things have to be observed and practiced as well. So I think we have to teach true observation and practice. I mean, you know, whatever it is you want to do, you got to have an idea of where you're going. You got to have a vision of where you're going, a strategy about how to get there. Then you have to have a plan to execute that strategy. And you need to be comfortable with an honest assessment of what you don't know and what you can't do so well, so that you build a team of people who know things you don't and who are good at things you aren't, so that, you know, you can do that. And then you got to always leave the door open for somebody to call and disagree with you. I remember, I want to say one thing nice about my friend here. I'll say more than one thing, but this particular one thing I was like, he used to call me twice a year in his second term just to talk. We'd talk, depending on how much time he had, because he was busier than me, somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes for several years. It meant a lot to me. We never talked about it in public. We talked about everything in the wide world. He asked my opinion. Half the time he disagreed with it. But I felt good about that. I thought that was a really healthy thing. And I'll never forget, first week I was in office, I got all the young people who'd helped me in my campaign. And I said, you know, if any of you ever come in this Oval Office and tell me what you think I want to hear, my goose is cooked. And I might as well run the White House with a computer. You've got to cultivate people who know things you don't and who have skills you don't. And yes, that can be taught. And then, if nothing else, we can help people get out of their own way. Everybody's got a story and a dream, and they can bring it to bear if we can just help people get out of their own way sometimes.
President Bush, there was no Presidential Leadership Scholars Program when you were growing up.
Yeah, there was. George H.W. Bush.
That's exactly where I was going.
Oh, okay. Well, you need to disguise your questions a little better.
So my next question is to President Clinton. President Clinton, is there anything you wish somebody had taught you about leadership before you became a leader?
Actually, I thought you were going to promote my book.
Yeah, I wish I'd read it, but you answer that question, and I will repeat.
Well, first of all, let me go back to the question that you answered. I agree with a lot what you said. I don't think you can teach humility. I don't think you can teach being secure. I don't think you can teach courage. I think you can give people tools if that's innately in their system, and that's what we intend to do. That's why this program is aimed at people who have exhibited leadership characteristics that you can't teach, and give them tools so that, in confidence, I really believe this is going to be a confidence boost. People who go through this program, they'll see other people their age or in the same area of work, and they'll say, wow, I think I can do more. I've studied William J. Clinton or George W. Bush or LBJ and George H.W. First, they're going to discover, we're just normal people who got caught up in through ambition and drive and circumstance ended up being president. They say, man, if these guys can do it, I can do it. And here are the tools necessary to do it. And so absolutely you can teach leadership skills. I don't think you can necessarily teach leadership qualities. And so this program is going to, I assume the committee is going to kind of screen for people who have shown leadership qualities, by the age 35 or 50 or however old the people are going to be. Anyway, I learned a lot from my dad. I'm very fortunate to have watched a great man. And as a matter of fact, this book I'm writing, I'm marketing now, which I think will be on November the 11th.
And
it's a love story. This is going to irritate people in Washington, I suspect, or some, because it's a love story. But it's a story about seeing somebody you admire and learning from them. And maybe this program will be able to do the same thing. And I learned a lot of lessons from being able to watch him throughout life. But I suspect that people are going to be able to say when they finish this program, I learned a lot about leadership when I studied the presidencies of the four people that are associated with the program.
And Mr. President, you clearly absorbed a lot of lessons from 41. I'm assuming those will be laid out in your book, available November 11th. $16.80 on Amazon.
No, a little higher.
I learned a lot from him. I'm not making any money off of it. Look, no, but let's explore that. It's one of the things that challenges for this program. Last week, I went to Kenny Bunkport as the designated black sheep of the Bush brood to see President Bush on the 70th anniversary of his being the youngest American pilot shot out of the sky in World War II. Now, somebody taught him how to fly the plane, but he was 20 and he wanted to be up there. And we had a flyover with an exact replica of the little bomber he flew, and it was a small bomber compared to the larger ones that were developed later, and the even smaller fighter planes that escorted them that were most famously flown by the Tuskegee Airmen, who were the only unit we had who never lost a bomber. Now, Benjamin O. Davis was the commander of the Tuskegee Airmen. He was a great leader. Why? Because he had simple sayings that he drilled into people. He said, our fighters cost $50,000, the bombers cost $250,000. Do not leave the formation to prove you can shoot down a German fighter plane. Protect the bomber. That's our job. And that was a simple leadership strategy that resulted in there being the only unit in World War II never to lose a bomber. And I was talking to President Bush about it, and I I told him I've been thinking about it all day. And he said he'd been thinking about it all day too, and he remembered everything that happened 70 years ago on that day, when his life nearly ended. Now, he was too young to have been through much leadership development except learning how to fly the plane. But I also think he got better as he went along. I think you got better as you went along. I know I got better than I went along. And I will say again, I think giving people access to inside skills and training, and also literally helping them to keep their heads on straight, is very, very important. Because anything that's really hard will become harder, and then you'll feel a lot of pressure. And you watch, we were talking about this golf tournament yesterday. When you get any kind of high-level competition, you got to work really hard to keep your mind, heart, and spirit in the same place, not get in your way, and never lose your focus. And I think there are ways to do that that are quite effective, and I hope we can be helpful to a lot of people.
Margaret and Stephanie just did a really nice job of describing the program, telling us the kinds of people that we're looking for in this Presidential Leadership Scholars Program. But let me ask each of you to tell us a little bit more about precisely the kind of people whom you would like to have participate in it. What would be a successful kind of person who could benefit from this program? President Bush.
Well, for sure, we want people from all walks of life and different political persuasions. We want people who have shown the capacity to succeed. People who work hard and who work with others in a good way. And people who, who've launched a career in whatever field, and we just want to be a little extra fuel. And remember the fellows, the White House fellows. Bill and I both had the honor of meeting with our White House fellows, an extraordinary group of people that would spend time in the White House. These were people that were highly motivated people. And it's not exactly like the White House fellows, but similar to the White House fellows. It ought to be a rigorous application process. One of the challenges, by the way, and we hope people who are supportive of this program help us, is to get people, one, aware of the program, and two, apply for the program. And, I guess that's, you got any other thoughts on that one?
Well, I'll give you one example of, I'd like for us to have some people who are involved in non-governmental organizations like our foundation work that operate at a smaller level but do really great work, but need to figure out how to ramp it up and do so with the help of modest donors. So it's become sustainable in their community or in their state or wherever. I think they could benefit from a program like this. I would like to have some people who are entrepreneurs in the program who are working in areas with enormous potential but significant uncertainty for America's economic future. And I'd like to have, to go back to one thing George said, I'd like to get some people from dramatically different backgrounds together with the charge to come up with something they can do together. For example, when the Tea Party first got organized, a lot of the early people who were interested in it were not involved with anybody big, anybody rich. They just thought the government had let them down, and that therefore, and they thought both the public and private sectors had gotten too big, and if everything worked the way they thought their hometown or their neighborhood or their upbringing worked, things would be all right. I'd like for some people like that to be paired with community activists in African American and Hispanic and immigrant Asian neighborhoods with projects that figure out what they could do together to have both the right culture and the right support system. And I think, we could do a lot of things like that that really would help develop leadership. And a skill that we are beginning to see atrophy in America, which is listening to people that disagree with us. We have made so much progress. We're less racist, sexist, and homophobic than we used to be, but we don't want to be around anybody that disagrees with us. And it's hard to make good decisions in complex environments. There's only two people have this number, and they're both related to me. I hope I'm not being told I'm about to become a premature grandfather.
That's right, yeah. That'd make national news. Yeah. All of
I
a
don't
sudden,
think
there
so.
goes a presidential scholarship program, you know.
I don't think so.
Well, President Bush, I've been admonished in asking these questions not to encourage you guys to commit news.
Thank you.
Here we are in the newseum.
Yeah.
So that requires leadership on your part, Josh.
It does, and I'm going to try to exercise it. But if either of you has any political announcements, endorsements, or predictions you would like to make, now would be a really fun time.
It's like the time the guy, remember the woman in I think in Canada asked us about, very dramatically said, "What about another Clinton-Bush matchup?" And my answer was, the first one didn't turn out too good.
Okay, I'm going to exercise some leadership and not let us get any farther off. But but I'm interested in the answers that both of you gave to the last question in talking about what kind of scholars you wanted. Neither of you talked about politicians or elected officials, because I gather that's not the core purpose of this scholarship program. It's not to train a bunch of new political leaders.
No, but I think that politics is important, and I know he does too. One of the things I would like to do if we got if we got into that, I thought about the other day. I went to see All the Way, the Broadway play about Johnson passing the Civil Rights Act, and Bryan Cranston won the Tony Award for it. I liked him way better as LBJ than a drug dealer, but he's a great actor. But I liked the movie Lincoln because it showed Abraham Lincoln as a politician making those dreaded deals, giving guys jobs and stuff to vote for the amendment to end slavery. I wouldn't mind having a leadership program which forces people to talk about the compromises that leaders have to make and which ones are more principled and which ones aren't. And is it only determined by the end, or don't you have to have some limits on the means too? I hope we do have some of that in there, because that's really important. If you lose the ability to keep the door open to people. I remember one day Trent Lott jumped all over me in a Sunday morning talk show, said I was acting like a spoiled brat. I never will forget this. Said my second term, I called him on the phone in the afternoon. He said, "Oh my God, have you called to chew me out?" I said, "Yeah, but not for what you think." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You worked hard last week, didn't you? And you agreed because somebody suggested you to do those Sunday morning talk shows. And you woke up exhausted with a headache. You were mad you had to go. They baited you when you got there, and you took the bait." He said, "That's exactly what happened. How did you know that?" I'm telling you this because it made us better friends. I didn't care what he said. I cared about whether we could go to work the next week. Those things I would like to help teach people. How did Mandela develop the strength to put the people who kept him in prison 27 years, the leaders of the parties, in his government? He didn't just invite them to the inauguration. He had them in his government. We're going to have to do some pretty radical things like that, I think, over the next 10 or 15 years if we're going to create real decision-making processes that work. So I'm not against having people in politics in this, but I'm against giving it a particular political cast.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm also concerned about the fact that people look at the political process and public service and they say, I don't want to serve. Who wants to get involved with that? Who wants their reputation besmirched? I think that this program, hopefully this program, will inspire good people to serve and say, look, it's worth the cost. It's worth the price. And so we didn't mention the military. I hope the military participates. I think it'd be very important to have people who wear the uniform go through a program like this. And so I'm not adverse to politicians. People saying politics is noble, I want to serve as a result of the program. I think it would be a wonderful dividend.
Let's talk for a minute about the curriculum of the Presidential Leadership Scholars Program. Margaret and Stephanie described it. It's got 4 key themes to the curriculum. The first is communications and vision. The second is decision making. The third is influence and persuasion. And the fourth is coalition building. In your mind, President Clinton, is any one of those 4 more important than the others?
Well, the Bible says where there's no vision, the people perish. But I think the truth is, if the test is, are things going to be better off when you quit than when you started? Whatever it is you're doing, you've got to do everything. You've got to have a vision which is articulated, turned into a strategy. Then you have to be able to execute the strategy to pass a bill, if you're trying to pass a bill, or if you're not in the political context, just to go do it. And you have to be able to assemble a team, as I say, people that know things you don't and have skills you don't, to do that and to build support for it. And I think all those things are exceedingly important. And then you have to stay at it. And one of the things that I hardly ever see, George, that I don't think of this, and we never talk about it, but I watched all those debates that he had with Vice President Gore. Not a single one of them did either one of them get asked, what are you going to do when they blow up the World Trade Center? So if you take a leadership position, you very often, particularly in an uncertain world, if you don't do or get caught trying to do what you said you were going to do when you ran, you feel like you've let yourself and your supporters down. Or if you take a job as chairman of a company, same thing. Or you start a small business. On the other hand, you can't ignore the incoming fire. That's what really damaged our friend Mbeki in South Africa. He said, Mandela created a modern political state, I'll create a modern economy, and here comes AIDS. So if you pretend like it doesn't happen, it'll sink you. You have to deal with that. And then you have to try to think of things that aren't in the headlines that will prepare for a future. You got to do all that. I don't think you can disaggregate these things. That's one of the things I hope will come out of this program.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. I thought Stephanie and Margaret had a valid point in that issues change, circumstances change, economies change, but there are certain principles that don't, management principles and leadership skills that won't change. And the idea, of course, is to not only have a class, but to have a series of classes of people, big alumni association, encouraging people to sign up, but also reinforcing the lessons learned about what it takes to lead. And again, in Washington, people think, oh, they're talking about, budget chairman or something like that. I mean, if you're a small business owner, these lessons apply to you as well. These four areas of discussion. You may have to communicate with fewer people, but nevertheless, you still have to communicate the vision. And in order for a company to succeed, for example, you got to know where it's going. I mean, leadership really in many ways is all about knowing where you, the leader, want to take somebody and have the skills necessary to do so. So I don't think you can disaggregate them.
Let me ask you about the 2 presidencies involved in this initiative that aren't represented on the stage. And President Clinton, I'm going to begin by asking you about 41. Even though you haven't written a book that will be out on November 11th about 41.
No, I think I could put one together to be ready for the middle of the... Be ready for the Christmas season.
Yeah.
But you you have worked a lot with 41 in your post-presidency, and you're known to be very, very close with him. What leadership attributes of 41 do you think have impressed you most and are the ones that you want to inculcate through this leadership program?
When you're dealing with President Bush 41, there are a couple of things that are never in doubt, and I think this is really important. His goodwill is never in doubt. And this was true before he was 90. We've been working together a long time now. We've been out of office a long time. He did things when most people were at an age where they'd stopped doing things. Jimmy Carter does the same thing. You got to respect that. People that he's 90. He just went to China to celebrate the 35th anniversary of opening the door to China. So anyway, when you deal with President Bush, you realize immediately that he is a person of goodwill, and that whatever it is he is doing because he thinks it's right and he wants to help somebody. I don't think that can possibly be underestimated as an attribute. If you don't have that, then everything else you're trying to do is a lot harder. When I was president, and I had a Republican Congress, 6 of the 8 years. The people that actually knew me, that I had a relationship with, that we had done something together on, Republicans who supported the Irish peace process, for example. We had a big leg up. I think it's very important when people see that. The other thing I think that he had that I believe every leader needs, and I think he's got too, by the way. We can all do the right thing when we're presented with a problem we know everything about and we understand the main players. But the best leaders have enough imagination and empathy that they can feel the situation somebody's in that they've never been in. And Bush 41 was great about that. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been out there plunking for the Americans with Disabilities Act. He had pretty clean air up in Kennebunkport, but he wanted those clean air standards. And when he was a congressman, he was one of the few Republican Southerners, or Republicans, and certainly one of the few Southerners to vote for the open housing law in 1968. A lot of people don't know that. Why was that? He could always live wherever the heck he wanted. He could put himself in the position of someone who had a different life with different life possibilities and different life changes. I think that's one of the most important characteristics a leader can have, and he has always been great at that.
Thank you. You're right.
President Bush, same question to you about Lyndon Johnson. What stands out in your mind about his leadership qualities that you'd like taught through this program?
I met Lyndon Johnson twice. Once when I was visiting my grandfather, who was a colleague of his in the Senate, and once later on, when he'd retired back to Texas. He was a big guy. I was struck by how imposing his whole kind of physical being was. And I would suspect amongst the four that his strongest quality was his persuasiveness, particularly to get the Civil Rights Bill passed. I mean, it's one of the greatest legislative feats in our nation's history. And Lyndon Johnson powered it through. And I don't think we're going to be able to teach size. But I will think people will be able to be inspired by his lesson. And yeah.
All right, President Clinton, let me ask you two to talk about each other for a minute. What
beautiful man, beautiful.
What in President Bush's leadership style stands out for you that you want taught in this scholars program?
when he decided what he thought was right, he went for it. And sometimes I didn't agree with what he thought was right. But I recognized that he was doing what he thought was right, not what he thought the politics of the moment required or what the constituencies, even within his own party, required. You can argue like no child left behind flat around, but one thing it certainly reflected was a concern for the achievement levels of all American students. And Ted Kennedy supported him on it. As I remember, they worked that out. That was kind of interesting couple. I remember when he said, "I don't do nuance," and he got bashed for it. And, you know, I like nuance in cloudy situations, but the truth is, sometimes clarity is required. And when he said it in a circumstance where he thought clarity was more important than being, you know, adding a 3-paragraph codicil to whatever your decision was. So I actually learned a lot watching him over the years. And I tell young people all the time who agree with my politics that when you look at the top of any organization, every now and then, for example, of all the world leaders I knew, I never talked to you about this, but of all the world leaders I came in touch with, I had an occasional lazy person, an occasional not real smart person, and an occasional crook. Most of them were smart, hardworking, and honest. And whether I agreed with them or not, they did what they thought was right. And so I think watching how they do it is very helpful. President Bush, in different ways from me, but both of us, me because I tend to look like I'm real nice, and him because he used to make fun of himself. You always want to be underestimated by your adversaries. He consistently benefited by being underestimated. And so did I, for totally different reasons. And I watched the way he thought through things and tried to approach them with clarity and decisiveness with great admiration. And if you read that book, you'll understand why. No, not the one coming out on whenever, blah, blah, blah. His other book. I was one of the non-right-wingers who bought it. It's a heck of a book.
President Bush, same question.
Well, thank you for that very much. There's a lot to admire about Bill Clinton. I think, first of all, he's an awesome communicator. And we've always admired that. He can really lay out a case and get people all across the political spectrum to listen. And I think it harkens back to what you said about my dad, and that is, you too have got great empathy for people. And if you have empathy for people like you do, then people are going to want to listen to you. And then when they start listening, you actually can convince them. And you too made tough decisions, I think, and, you know, listened carefully and decided. One of the things we're going to hopefully teach people, but through the case studies, is that at some point in time, a leader has to decide. And you did that. And you told people where you want to lead in a way people could understand. And and then made decisions and stuck by them. And so, yeah. Is that enough? I know it's a lot shorter than your answer, I know. But it, yeah, okay.
But I think equally powerful.
Thank you, Josh. Yes. Former chief of staff, I appreciate you saying that.
So President Bush, I'm gonna pass the last question to you.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you, what advice do you have for President Clinton on the leadership qualities necessary to be a good granddad?
be prepared to fall completely in love again. You're not going to believe it. You're just not going to believe the joy and the fun. And I'm looking forward to talking to you after that child is born. And we all hope the very best for Chelsea, and that the child's health be strong, like I'm confident it will be. Anyway, it's going to be an awesome period for you. And yeah, get ready also to be like the lowest person in the pecking order in your family.
Gentlemen, this has been a great conversation, which I think has amply demonstrated that you all are coming together in support of a great program, which will, I think, be terrific for the country, both for the substance of what it's going to teach some new leaders, but also for what it will say to the country. Sure. Please join me in thanking these two extraordinary leaders.